Hey everybody, welcome to this week's Roundup. No special announcements or anything, so let's jump right in. First up, there's a new version of VUEngine Studio, which is a homebrew game creation engine for the Virtual Boy that allows things like a new sound player and a whole bunch of tricks to make Virtual Boy games from scratch that look amazing. And in fact, I would go as far as to say some of the homebrew that I've seen in the Virtual Boy community is equal to or better than most of the official games for the platform anyway. And people enjoy crapping on the Virtual Boy for some reason, and I get it. There's a lot of weirdness about it, but there are some good games on it, and some of the best are the homebrew, and a lot of that is because of VUEngine. So if you're a game dev that wants to make a game on a weird older platform, you basically have to use this one, and that's a good thing. But even if you're just a fan of stuff like this, check out the post. The Patreon post from the team is public, so you could read it right there, whether you're a supporter or not. But I try to always support teams like this because while I'm nowhere near smart enough to be able to make a Virtual Boy game, I loved playing the ones that this engine has created. So I want to try to support the team as much as I can and try to spread the word about it. And also, if you're interested in some of the weird and awesome accessories and games for the Virtual Boy, I did a live stream that's a couple years old, but it's pretty accurate still. Just there's more games, but the accessories and stuff are all valid. So I would definitely check that out if you're kind of interested in the good side of the Virtual Boy, because there's just too many videos out there crapping on it when there's lots of great stuff available for it. The developer Hoffman just ported another game over to the Neo Geo. This time it's Golden Axe. And the first port was Shinobi, which was accomplished by reverse engineering the Sega 16 platform and then rewriting all of the code in assembly to work on the Neo Geo. So I guess using all of that information and all of the tools that were created with that, Hoffman decided to do it with Golden Axe as well, and went above and beyond and also did things as like with the audio, some of the sound samples were remastered by going back to their original sources before being put over on the Neo Geo. And this should be playable on MVS, AES, and Neo Geo CD, as well as any way to emulate it, including the Mister. So, this is one of those things that I'm always super impressed by. And I really think that people need to put it into context, because if you just ask the question, how do I play Golden Axe? There's a million easy ways to accomplish that. But if you're somebody with like a big red Neo Geo cab and a ROM cart, this is a really awesome way to play an arcade game on an arcade machine. And it's also kind of trippy to think of seeing a Sega game on a Neo Geo platform. So if you want more info, check out Alex's post. There's also a playthrough of the Neo Geo CD port that's embedded in here. And that one actually has a symphonic score from Richard Douglas, taking advantage, obviously, of the CD quality audio. So I think these are absolutely awesome. And I just think this is one of those things that if you've got a Neo Geo cabinet and a way to play ROMs, you got to try this out. Because, come on, it's Golden Axe. There's now an open source FPGA-based handheld project called the GameBub that's aiming to play Game Boy, Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance cartridges or ROMs via a micro SD card. And it also has a dock that could connect to a TV via HDMI and the ability to use a link port to connect to original Game Boy consoles as well. And this is one of those things that it's just a fully open source project, and at the moment there's no plans on anybody selling them. However, anybody is welcome to make them based on the licenses. And also you could put together your own, and there's an interest check going on for entire kit purchases. So this is one of those things that I absolutely love to see, because if you're looking to just buy something, plug in your cartridges, and start gaming, you got the Analog Pocket. And I mean that with love. It's an awesome handheld. But if you want to have a do-it-yourself project, or if you want something that's fully open source that maybe other stuff could be added to it in the future, this is a pretty cool way to go about doing it. So definitely check out Crystal's post, and even go through and check out the video and the GitHub and the blog posts as well if you're looking to get into this stuff. And I'd love to see people's opinions on it that have used it alongside things like the Chromatic and the Pocket, just to see how it holds up. Now, obviously, keep realistic expectations. A 100% open source project isn't going to have the money behind it that bigger companies or even medium companies like Analog would have to put into the development. So I just think it's got potential to be incredible, and I'd love to hear experts' opinions on it. But I'm glad we got to share it here, because anytime there's a fun open source project, I feel like we should all just check it out and see what we think. So I finally released that video on how to scale your home movies to 4K using completely free software. And the video is both prematurely released as well as been completely done for over 6 months. So I'll give a quick backstory on it, but I do think that this is a really important video for anybody to watch who's interested in scaling this stuff and wants to understand how and why you need to do these things, regardless of what you end up actually doing the scaling with. But basically, I used to be really into video digitizing back in the early 2000s when it was first available. And then I did the best I could back then with the tools and money I had available. But a couple years ago, after I moved out of the city, I really started refocusing on that because I realized there was just far more misinformation out there than there was good information. And there are some awesome YouTube channels out there for this, but most of the here's how you digitize your tapes videos are dead wrong, even by people who make good videos with other subjects as well. So I kind of dug in deep and I did a bunch of live streams, making all the mistakes live in front of everybody, learning from the awesome people in the comments, learning from my friends who have been walking me through this. And I finally got to a place where I figured out what you should know before going in. And this is one of those things where if you care even a little bit, you should know this. If you're just like, I don't care at all, I just want to put this video up on Facebook for my family, I don't care how it looks, I don't care if it's stretched, skip it. Go to one of those bad YouTube videos and just use one of those terrible Amazon boxes, and it's fine if that's what you need. But if you care at all, this video walks you through, basically why 480i video for home movies looks the way it does, what you need to do to scale it. Well, verify first and then scale it. And then I show software called Bravicon, which is awesome, but it's a really complicated on the back end side of things GUI that makes it very easy for you on the front end to just kind of click and do some stuff. But the back end is mostly finished, but Simon still has to work out a couple of bugs on it. Like there's a scaling error where sometimes you get files that are bigger than the target, meaning like the resolution size. And also it doesn't auto compensate for aspect ratio. However, if you're somebody that plans on editing afterwards in any video editing software whatsoever, Premiere, Resolve, whatever, that's a complete non-issue. Just follow the guide step by step, and then just aspect correct and size correct after you do your, or while you're doing your final edits to stitch together whatever you have. And I feel like that's a lot of us. There's a lot of us nerds that are very comfortable using video editing software. So for things that are super important anyway, running these scaling processes and then editing afterwards, just going to make it super easy and look incredible. That said, if you're just looking for a way to get your clips cut the way I show it in this video and then upload those directly, it's not bad. And in fact, it's still better than 99% of the other solutions out there. But there are a few things that still need to be worked out. So the video that I made was pretty much done 6 months ago, and Simon's just really been working hard trying to figure out how to get these last things ironed out for Bravicon. So I don't know if I'm going to end up doing another video showing you how to take everything from this video, but use a different software than Bravicon for the scaling, or maybe there's going to be some Linux solution that gets made where we could just boot from a USB stick and do it all from that. That's kind of been my hope for years, by the way. But I will have a interview next week coming out with somebody who's a video preservation expert. That's what he does for a living, and it kind of talks about a lot of this stuff. But honestly, this is just one of those videos that it's never going to be perfect. And even if Bravicon was flawless, something else is going to come out. So I needed to make this video both to answer a ton of questions I always get about this stuff, but also just to prep you, because the shortest part of the video is just using Bravicon. Everything else is what you need to know. The prep, the checking your files, what to expect, the comparisons of where we're at with this stuff now. And even if there's a different software or if Bravicon changes a little bit and I got to do a very quick update video on that, everything else about this is going to stay the same. So while this is more work than I've put into any other video in a long time, I expect this to have the least amount of views, but I just hope, I hope the people that do watch it are able to get something out of it. So as always, I'm always open to your feedback, and maybe I made a mistake releasing this without Bravicon being totally finalized, but I don't know. I think it still puts us in a good place, and I still think it's something that's very usable and very helpful for most people. So as always, let me know what you think. The developer IQ132 recently released a port of the arcade game Karnov to the Neo Geo platform, and it's currently running on the Neo Geo MVS and the Neo Geo CD. However, AES users aren't able to insert coin with a select button yet, so that's something that could be patched in the future to work if you have an AES ROM card. But essentially, you need to download the original MAME files for it and then run IQ132's conversion script that's available right in the post, and that would convert it to a basic Neo Geo format, and then you could use other things like the Terra Onion Neo Builder if you need a .neo file for it instead. So this is just another cool port of a game to the Neo Geo platform, and like I said before, if you have a big red and you want to play Karnov, I think it makes perfect sense. So check out Ray's post for more info on it, as well as links to the previous conversions from IQ132 and all the scripts that you would need for everything else. So it's all right here in Ray's post. Kyle from Kaitour Industries recently released his design files for his SCART to BNC adapter. And this is very specifically designed for people who have an RGB SCART cable that want to output both to SCART and BNC. So the most common use case scenario would be you have a PVM monitor that only has inputs or has broken BNC outputs, which I've definitely seen that before. And you also want to go to something like a RetroTink 5X or 4K. This is an excellent device for that. Now, there's a few things to note. First, it's based off of a THS 7374 amp, which means a couple of things. First, it is perfectly safe to connect to two different targets at the same time. This is the exact type of powered splitter that you would need. And also, since the THS 7374 has a low-pass filter toggle built in, Kyle added a switch for that. Now, in this scenario, I would actually almost never use it because PVMs aren't going to need it. And if you're going into a Tink, that has a better filter already built into its software anyway. So turning on the low pass filter might soften the image a little bit. However, I 100% agree with Kyle including it because it's already there built into the chip. So why not just add the toggle anyway? So this is one of those features that you're probably never going to use, but it's smart to put it in just in case you run into a scenario, which there's definitely some fringe scenarios I could think of that I won't bore you with, but I'm glad it's there. The other thing to note is this doesn't have a sync stripper built in. So this is not for something like going to Extron equipment like cross points or RGB interfaces or stuff like that. However, that's not what it was designed for. You're not going to need a sync stripper at all going into 99% of PVMs and also into any of those scalers. So it's kind of a niche product. Kyle loaded all the files up on GitHub if anybody wants to just make their own, including, I think there's a 3D printed case design on there as well. He sold a few of them in the Etsy store, which I believe they're sold out now. And I think maybe the reason they're not on the main site is because it is such a niche product, but there's enough people out there that need that I hope maybe he considers making another round or something. Because, most of us probably have setups that you don't need something like this, but I guarantee there's a couple of people listening right now that are like, crap, that's exactly what I need for my setup. So maybe Kyle or somebody else will make a few more, but if you want to make your own, seems like a fairly easy assembly. The picture of the PCB, there's some surface mount components that are definitely going to be a pain to add. So it's really, you got to decide if you're comfortable doing stuff like that. But thanks, Kyle, for the design, and I guarantee this is going to be a help for people. Now it's time for this week's Mr. Updates, care of Lou from Lou's Retro Source. As usual, I'm going to skim through these and just give my thoughts where I feel like it, but please check out his video for visual examples and a lot more details. First up, the Zapparoo project is adding a service that provides some online features where people can do things like create NFC cards that have special URLs, or you could even have every scanned Zapparoo hit a URL and request a Zap script to run. And it also has the ability to encode Zapparoo media cards that could download a ROM before launching if it doesn't exist on your MiSTer. So this project started out just being like a neat way to launch games, and it's evolving into something way cooler that just allows for a lot of awesome integration and stuff like that. So one thing I do hope people might look into is any kind of RetroNAS integration. So any kind of auto download or URLs could go to your RetroNAS. I think that would be really, really helpful for anybody who uses that setup, and anybody with multiple MiSTers should really be looking into that. Moving on, unfortunately, the MT32 Pi project is no longer going to have any development added unless somebody else steps in for the open source part of it. I guess the developer was dealing with a bunch of harassment and didn't really want to deal with it anymore. And I get it. I mean, the moment I launched RetroRGB, before I even knew it was being indexed in Google, I jumped on a forum to check something, and there was a whole bunch of people crapping all over it. So I get it. It's a lot. And, if you're not somebody who's built to deal with that kind of stuff, then you should walk away. And I mean that with love. I don't mean that anything else, any other way. So, the developer wanted to step away, but you could still support Dopefish if you want to say thanks for all the amazing work on it. And if you're a developer that's into it, you could certainly check out the GitHub and see if there's anything else that you wanted to fork or add to it. But, it's sad to see the project not being updated by the original dev anymore, but there's a lot of amazing work out there. So thank you, Dopefish, for everything. Next up, Pixel Memories is releasing some new NFC sprite figurines that you could use on Zapparoo-enabled Mister setups, and these new sprites can be added to many of the existing sprites that are available on the Pixel Memories Ko-fi page. You can even pair them up with sprites-themed NFC readers that Pixel Memories also offers. Next, Hotego has released 2 new arcade games that are based on the Fairyland story hardware. One of the games is Typhoon Gal, which is a beat-em-up arcade game, and the other is Rumba Lumber, which is a top-down maze game that mixes puzzle and action elements. They're still in beta, so this is for Patreon subs, but as always, as soon as the bugs are worked out, Hotego releases them to the public. Next up, the Ironclad DX is now a new version of the Ironclad Mini ITX motherboard for the Mister project. We talked about this before, but this is the official release now on the DX version, which has some improvements that are pretty important. First is the ability to use basically any of the DE10s, the official one or either of the alternatives. It also has 24-bit analog video output, dual SD RAM capabilities, and you could choose to use the DE10 Nano's power supply or an ATX power supply, which I think is important because a lot of people's setups were basic enough where you didn't need an ATX power supply. But it's very helpful if you have a bunch of accessories, so I love the fact that you have both options. It's not cheap, though. It's 220 euros, so that's one of those things where I would just check this out with as well as the other alternatives and see what fits your needs the best. If you're just looking to mount the DE10 into a mini ITX case, there's other projects out there. I'm so sorry I'm forgetting the name of the one that I use that's sitting right over there now. I feel so bad about that, but it was like $20. So if you just need a basic interface, that's one thing. If you need something fully loaded, check out the Ironclad. Next up, Mister Organize is a project that'll help you keep your games organized for browsing on your Mister, and it contains custom DAP files that instruct it on how to organize games. And it even has things like mixing around the no intro games, adding MSU1 upgrades, adding some of the conversions like the ones from Rumblemans and Infidelity. And this project looks really, really interesting. And as you would all imagine, I'm going to ask, has anybody integrated this or used this with RetroNAS? Because it does use different kinds of scripts that do have Linux versions available. Because this is one of those things that I would love to just load up onto my RetroNAS, press a button, and have it automatically take care of my collection, or maybe even scan archive for updates. So when new stuff happens, it could just pull that right in for me automatically. And I think this is something that anybody who uses RetroNAS would kill for, especially if you could have it running on the RetroNAS and not on your Mister. So all of this stuff would be done in the background automatically for you. So if anybody out there has any info on that, please let me know. I would love to test it out, and I'm pretty positive anybody who uses RetroNAS would as well. Next up, the PC XT core now has CRT tuning features, kind of like Hotego and a lot of the other arcade developers add to theirs, where you could center the image on your CRT. And that's really, really important, especially for stuff like arcade games, because those were designed to be put one at a time in an arcade machine. And every time you switch games, you're supposed to take a second to tweak the pots and make sure everything's centered. So it doesn't have a standard center like you would most other things. So the fact that now you can do it with the PCXT is really cool. And that's one of those things that I wonder if global support for that in the Mr. Core would ever be, or in the Mr. platform is possible, or if this is something that has to be on a per core basis anyway. But either way, I appreciate stuff like this being added. Next up, Birdie Bro has updated the Tecmo Arcade Core with a bunch of different fixes and the ability to add 1-player and 2-player start to a single controller to match upright cabinet behavior of Rygar. So it's cool if you're if you play any of the games with the Tecmo Arcade Core, just run your update to get them. There's also been a bunch of updates to the Color Computer 2 core, as well as the TRS-80 core, and the Color Computer 2 is the TRS-80. Basically. So these are things where if you like emulating those platforms on the Mister, definitely check out Lou's video in this post, run through it and see if these things fix any issues that you might have been having. But I just think it's awesome to be able to try these older platforms on modern stuff. I did have the Color Computer 2 as a kid, mostly because my dad got a Tandy 1000 and I wouldn't stop playing with it. So I think he bought me the TRS-80 Coco 2 just to shut me up and get me on my own display. But whatever, still have great memories of that thing. The next game challenge on the Mr. Discord is Bad Dudes vs. Dragon Ninja. It's a single credit score challenge that goes into February 23rd. And lastly, Taki showed off more 3D renders of what the Super Dock may or may not end up being. And that's the dock for the project that's going to probably launch by the end of this year, so a year from now. So more details when there's actually something serious. But anyway, thanks as always to Lou for keeping up with this stuff. I'm very happy to support him on Patreon because I rely on Lou to get my Mr. news. And if you do too, please consider supporting as well. The homebrew Neo Geo game Block Panic DX is now available on the Neo Geo CD. The developer Blastar released the first versions for the MVS and AES at the end of 2023, and it now swung back around and was able to get the Neo Geo CD version working. And one of the unique things about this is it supports 4 players. And this is interesting because there's not many Neo Geo games that would be able to do that. And if you want to play on original hardware, you'd need to find something like a Neo Tap or one of those Neo 4-player FTC 1Bs, which are equally as rare. However, if you want to play this on Mr., Sorg has added the ability to have 4 players in co-op on the Neo Geo core itself. So thanks to Sorg for jumping in and doing that. That's a pretty neat thing to do. And, if you have any kind of setup where you want to play Neo Geo games like that with multiple players, I think the Mister is probably going to be the easiest way by far to do it. So, this is kind of like a Tetris-y style game, like, if you like your typical puzzler type of stuff. And it looks very cool, and it looks like something that I would want to play if I had a Neo Geo Big Red Cap. So definitely check out Ray's post if you want more info, but I like unique stuff like that. So 4-player mode is pretty cool. And once again, thanks to Sorg for adding that to the Mister. Tito from Macho Nacho Productions recently released a video showcasing some mods for the Xbox 360, the RGH3, a Viper Pro dual NAND kit, an LTU2 replacement board, and a brand new case for it. And essentially, Tito took that Xbox 360 that he made a video on a couple years ago, one that he found broken and was able to get working, and then upgraded it with all of these awesome features. And what I took away from this is, while it's a typical Macho Nacho video, they're enjoyable to watch, it also kind of gives you a primer of what to expect with Xbox 360 modding and jailbreaking and stuff like that. And it seems like the knowledge to figure out what mods you need and what to do to each mod and what to flash them are much more complicated than a lot of the mods themselves. These aren't easy. It's certainly not like adding a mod chip into a Saturn or something like that, but it's figuring out what to do for which model is kind of a pain. So seeing Tito go through it and show some basic screenshots of what needed to be done, and then of course the hardware installation process and all that, I think this is a really cool go-to video for people that might want to get into Xbox 360 modding but don't know where to start. So I would start by watching this video, and then I would spend quite a bit of time on the console mods wiki going through the 360 section And that should be able to get you everything that you need to know, as at least where to start. But just double and triple check everything, because you're going to want to get the right boards, the right flashes for each of them. Tito showed going through and trying to flash the DVD firmware with, the drive firmware with a different board and stuff doesn't always work. So this is one of those things that, unless you're already a 360 modding expert, watch this video before you go into it so you know what to expect. But as always, thanks to Tito for making them. Well, that's it for this week. As always, thanks to everybody who watches, listens, plays nicely in the comments, and especially thank you to anyone who supports in absolutely any way, because it really is you who's keeping all this stuff alive. So thank you all so much, and I'll see you next week. This week's Roundup is brought to you by Neo Paradigm Entertainment, connecting Southeast Asian influencers with opportunities in the West.